Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Health Kick with Dr. K. Today, we are talking about gut health. And I realized as I was typing up the notes for this, and generally I try to have like one stream of thought going. So, the one stream of thought is gut health, but I realized as I was getting into it that I've kind of gone on a few tangents. So, just bear with me as we go through the information. And if there's any questions from the audience, we'll go through those. I know I've had some people ask me a couple questions even before I got to the podcast, so I will address those as well. So, what I wanted to touch on today was the top 5 things that I've seen in practice and that I feel have been the most effective and efficient ways to get your gut health kind of started. So, just get rolling on and get on track. So, I guess as a side note, I used to think when I graduated from naturopathic school that, it was the food that we got amazing and all we had to do is just do different food combinings and we can get all the nutrients that we need from food. And I've come to realize over time that no matter how good somebody is at rotating their diet, at, having things in moderation, um, it's not even close. The food quality has gone down so drastically in the last, I mean, it's supposed to be 50 years, but I would say even in the last 20 years, it's really gone downhill. And just in terms of, the chemicals that we use, the pesticides, the genetic modification, we've all done these things to try and better our food sources. But at the end of the day, um, not realizing how much impact that has on the nutrient status of the food and just the quality in general and how that can impact our own genetics, our own, nutrient absorption and all of those things. So that might sound a little weird, like, one of those kind of like weirdo type things to say, but honestly, being in practice and just seeing day in, day out, talking about people's nutrition, it's really a big deal as to the quality that we're consuming. So the first point I wanted to make, so in my top 5 things to do to improve your gut health overall, the first thing is committing to eating at least 3 different vegetables in a day. So that can show up any type of way, but at least 3 different types of veggies. So if you have a salad with, carrots and beets and spinach, for example, boom, you've already knocked that out, right? But I think that people, if they're not tracking their food or logging it, they do forget, because I can't tell you how many times I ask people about their nutrition all the time. And so I can't tell you the number of times where the person has been like, I don't even know what I ate yesterday, right? I don't remember, because it's just something, it's like they're going through the motions and, other important stuff has come up and they just forget. So what happens once they actually start logging their food and tracking it is that they actually eat the exact same thing for breakfast, pretty much the same thing for lunch, and dinner is always like the same, handful of different items that they might rotate through over the course of the month. So at the end of the day, you're not really diversifying, so you're not making a lot of changes in the nutrient profile that you're getting, and also the gut bacteria. Now, the gut bacteria is kind of like a whole different topic, and as I say, I could digress like on all these different areas that I'm trying to touch on, but essentially, what you want to do is have a bunch of different types of vegetables in your diet, because they're providing different minerals, different vitamins, fiber, and and people are not too sure, but these are all carbs. So when you talk about cutting carbs, you're not talking about like your fruit and vegetables. That's more so maybe bread, pasta, rice, etc. Right? So 3 different types of vegetables in a day. And I would also think of the vegetables in categories. So you have like your root vegetables, then you have, your gut nourishing specific ones like the fermented vegetables, then you have your green leafy vegetables. So if you can think of them in categories that way and try to get each category, then that is great. So examples would be, squash, sweet potato, fermented foods would be more so like sauerkraut, kimchi. There's this new thing called coconut kefir. So a lot of people are sensitive to dairy, so they couldn't just have regular kefir, and now there's this thing called coconut beer, which has also got some great fermented gut bacteria in there for you as well. So that's the first thing, committing to eating 3 different types of vegetables in a day. The second thing is water. So I think I've probably maybe done like 2 or 3 different podcasts on water, or had that as part of my talk at some point. So anyone who's been following along would know that I talk about water all the time as well. And 2 liters a day is the absolute bare minimum. So the Kidney Foundation recommends that 2 liters a day minimum, just to prevent kidney stones later on in life. And if you've experienced kidney stones, or you know anyone who has, most people describe it as the most intense pain they've ever experienced in their entire life. So 2 liters, definitely minimum. But then you also need to factor in, like, now the weather's getting warmer, people are outside more, doing more activity. You need to account for that. And then anyone who has a very active profession. So if you're in construction or the trades, that's another profession that needs more water. Or if you're in a talking profession. So if you're somebody who has meetings all day, or you're talking with clients, or you're a teacher, that is also another way that water. So we use the cup for a cup rule. So if you have any caffeine, any caffeinated beverage, then you would have the same volume of water. So for example, 1 cup of coffee, then you add an additional cup of, so coffee and water. Each cup has to be the same. And then same thing for alcoholic beverages of any kind. So if you're a person that has, maybe 2-3 coffees a day, then that automatically pushes your water intake from, the minimum of 2 liters a day up to 2.75, maybe even 3 liters a day. And as I say, 2 is the minimum. So anything above that, you're actually starting to float into optimal rather than just getting by. And so that's the second one. So first one was at least 3 different types of veggies in a day. Second one is minimum 2 liters of water in a day. Thirdly, I mentioned alcoholic beverages just a moment ago, but if you can, and you think it's even part of your lifestyle or sustainable even for a short amount of time, cutting out alcohol is a big deal. So on any given day, our livers are working overtime for us. They're processing chemicals that come in, they're processing medications that we take, supplements. They're basically the huge filtration system of all the blood and everything that you're taking in a day, all the chemicals that we're exposed to. And, in office environments, for example, you don't necessarily think about your chemical exposure, but even just like plastics, equipment, all of these things, like they're throwing out, chemicals from their, if they've been starched or sprayed with something to keep it, all of these vapors are in the air. So we all have chemical exposures, some more than others, but your liver is constantly working. And what I've seen in practice is that there's been some people that have had, otherwise healthy people, and they just happen to go for an abdominal ultrasound, which is taking imaging and looking at your stomach area, and come to find out that they have fatty liver, right? And no symptoms, no signs. And again, that's a whole other story, because the body is very adaptable and can work under stress and non-optimal conditions. But come to find out that they have fatty liver. And so then we're looking at, okay, well, what lifestyle factors have played into this? And even people that are not consuming, they're the rules for alcohol used to be like, if you're doing it for cardiac health, then it's, 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men. But a lot of those regulations have started to change because they realize that people are, even small amounts, even 1 to 2 drinks a week, not even a day, has now started affecting the liver very significantly. Um, there are other factors that play into fatty liver, especially it can be from the chemicals that are in the water, in the food, your environment, alcohol, all of these different factors. But the more factors that you can remove from the liver having to deal with, the better it's able to cope, the better, longevity you get out of your liver and all of these good things. So cutting out alcohol, it might be a huge commitment for you and a huge lifestyle change. But, I think Budweiser for sure just came out with like a new one that doesn't have any alcohol in it at all. So, if it's a factor of you just have it on social occasions, for example, then, you still have the opportunity to have something that you enjoy. So the fourth factor that I wanted to talk about is minimal to no wheat. So wheat is often like used gluten interchangeably, but gluten is actually a protein found in wheat. So I'm just going to talk about wheat in general. So, and this is pretty well very important as far as energy, as far as gut health, as far as long-term health, because wheat is never just like a standalone thing. It's generally, it has sugar with it. It has maybe high salt. Maybe the portions are off. Like there's a bunch of reasons where wheat can become problematic for people. And recently I've had a couple people in practice where they had the celiac blood test done, because now you can do the blood test and find out if you have celiac or not, rather than having to go through the scope. The scope and the biopsy are still kind of the gold standard, but now they're screening people out with this blood test. So you can always ask your MD about it. But what happens is that a lot of times the test is negative. So that's actually a good thing, because that means you don't have an autoimmune condition. However, that doesn't mean that you're not reacting to wheat at all, right? So there's other types of ways that you can be reacting, which is an IgG reaction. And people experience that in a various types of ways. So it can be, digestive upset, constipation, bloating, but it can also be like show up as extreme fatigue, brain fog, mood changes. So I would say that one for sure is important as far as gut health goes. And the fifth point that I wanted to make was that you want to minimize foods that impact your hormones. So notoriously, red meat and dairy have been kind of thrown under the bus as far as their hormonal impact because of, antibiotic use, because of growth hormone use. So just being mindful, if you have anything like fertility concerns, PCOS, fibroids, any constipation, more so for the dairy side of things, but any of those things that are impacting you, consider how your external hormone sources are going. So unfortunately, there's a lot of things called xenoestrogens, so external to us estrogens in the environment. Like for example, receipt paper contains xenoestrogens, so every time that you touch a receipt, you're getting some little dose of estrogen. But red meat and dairy also are going to be impacted. So if you know anyone who's dealing with these things, or you're dealing with it yourself, those red meat and dairy are things to consider either minimizing or removing completely. So to summarize, vegetables, water, no alcohol, no wheat, no dairy, no red meats. Is it doable? Yes, it's doable. Is it hard? Yes, it's very, very hard. But what do you get out of making these changes? You get better energy, better sleep, less digestive upset, less achy joints. your skin clears up, and more importantly, like your long-term health is impacted and impacted in a positive way. So um, just bear in mind that even though it's hard and maybe you don't do all 5 of these things at once, maybe you just pick one thing and roll with that. Every small change that you make has an amazing impact on your health, and every conscious decision that you make for your health is always going to be a benefit and an improvement. Um, so I did touch a little bit on skin. So wheat and dairy are kind of the most common food sensitivities when we talk about skin conditions, whether it be eczema, psoriasis, some of the internal stuff like rheumatoid arthritis, um, acne. So a lot of adults, myself included, you think you get out of your teens and you're like, sweet, there's no more acne anymore. This is amazing. And you might have a few good years, and then all of a sudden you're getting acne as an adult. And so a lot of adults come in and they're like, what the heck is going on? I thought I was over this, and now like back in my 30s again, and I have this crazy acne. So I've done food sensitivity testing for them. We've changed up, that we've improved their gut health by doing pretty well the 5 steps that I ran you through, and their skin looks amazing. And the reason for that, one, is that our gut health impacts our immune health, which impacts like our full body health, and the foods that we eat impact our hormones. So if there's anything that's out of whack, the foods that we eat can have a huge impact on that. But easier said than done. Some of these changes do require, 3 to 6 months of consistent change to make it a big impact on the skin. The skin tends to be kind of the last thing that changes. Usually energy and sleep are the first things to get better. And then, slowly digestion. And then finally, kind of like the inside out factor. The other thing that kind of crossed my mind while I was writing the notes for this podcast is, how many times I've had people say that they feel like they're addicted to a certain food. And if you think about, your diet right now, and just kind of run through what you eat on a daily, or, what you feel like you can't live without, just be very mindful of those foods, because what can happen is, there's not really a food scarcity generally. So, if it's chocolate, for example, you can go to the store and buy it, and maybe the next day you go to do that and the same thing. So just have a look at the patterns that you see yourself falling into, and be mindful of what's the mental, emotional reason for consuming that. What is going on in your life? Is it something that you're eating every single day? Um, because, portion size, moderation, all of these things do also play a factor. And if it's something that's very salty or very sweet, we also have to know that we kind of have a predisposition that we already really like those things. So just being mindful that even if, like, let's say your thing is ice cream, and then you're trying to reduce your dairy consumption because you're worried about its hormonal impact. Maybe instead of having ice cream, every night after dinner, maybe you try, coconut ice cream, so dairy-free ice cream. Or maybe you do like one day on, one day off, or something like that, just so that, again, those small changes make that big impact later on. And I mean, as for food addiction, it's a real thing. It's you can go through withdrawal not eating certain foods. You can get obsessive thoughts about food. And I wish I had the magic thing that could help people get over that. I don't. But the realization that you are addicted to XYZ food is helpful in figuring out, okay, well, what are some small tricks you can do for yourself that, you know, helps you not either overconsume it, or, binge eat it, or whatever the case may be. Some of the supplements that I talk about with gut health and whatnot is L-glutamine. So that is a specific, it's a protein, actually, amino acid that the gut cells really like, and it helps them to repair and regenerate. The veggie greens, as I say, I used to romanticize the fact that we could get everything from food and we just can't. So veggie greens has now made the list of things that I do say, you know what, this is probably a good idea. And probiotics, depending on the person. So if you're thinking of, you feel like your gut health is kind of in disarray, um, chat with a healthcare provider about these things and about taking them and figuring out what is the best amount for you and what can help you feel better. Because, as I say, living with constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, um, chronic fatigue, like all of these things, these are not normal, and they do generally have simple solutions. Simple and very hard sometimes solutions, but simple. If you want to learn more about any of this kind of topic, I would look into Mark Hyman and Mindy Peltz. Both of them have great information and generally kind of like step by step how to go about doing these things. Um, and then lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about food sensitivity testing. So I love it. And again, same thing with this. I've probably talked about it a million times at this point. But I have just seen so many what one would consider miraculous transformations in people's health just after doing this testing and then following it. So my first person, they used to get stomach pain. They would get stomach pain for 3 hours a day. They would have to lay down and they could not move for those 3 hours. And you can imagine this is a person that has a family, has a life, has a job. You can't just be out of commission every single day for 3 hours. Not to mention the fact that it was like excruciating pain. And so, all the scopes were done and everything was, quote unquote normal. So we did food sensitivity testing with them, gave them some supplements to repair their gut, because obviously it was very angry in there. And within a month, they didn't have that stomach pain anymore. Like, did not have it at all. So just know that if you're living with something and you feel like this thing is never going away, there's always something that can be done, right? So it's a matter of finding either the practitioner that's going to help you, or, I'm not a huge fan of people Googling stuff, because it mostly scares them. But if that is part of you, like advocating for your health and trying to figure out what is going on, then, and it's not just like Wikipedia stuff, then there's some merit in that. And one other case study that I wanted to talk about was somebody who had chronic regurgitation. So they would just like spit up their food all the time, every single day. And you can imagine that if you can't keep your food inside you, you're missing out on a ton of nutrients. You will be tired. You will feel, your mood starts to go down because you're not getting enough protein. Like, there's a bunch of things that are kind of like a cascade after that whole thing happens. And so, same thing. They were just feeling miserable, and they couldn't go out to eat anywhere. They couldn't do anything. And same thing. We did the food sensitivity testing with them, and after a month, they had only had 2 episodes of that happening in that month, and none after the first 2 weeks, right? So for this, like, these people experience life-changing events just by having the food sensitivity testing. So, and this might be something that is, again, out of reach as far as cost goes for some people, and that's okay, because you can just start with the basics. The top 3 things that people are most sensitive to are wheat, dairy, and eggs. So anytime I've done this test, at least one of those things is on there for sure. But a lot of people have all of those things. And as I say, I really do think it comes back to food quality and what people are exposed to. I think that because wheat is in so many things, it's in candy, it's in, it's in the actual bread that you're eating, it's in just whatever, it's in so many things. I think our small exposures make it so that we just become so bombarded with it now, whereas before we never did. So, top 5 things: vegetables, water, cutting out alcohol, minimize wheat, minimize dairy, and just giving yourself a chance as far as figuring out what you can do to diversify your diet. So eating different things every day, and using these tips to help yourself feel better. So before we end today, just want to quickly mention that next month, Saturday, June 24th, from 4 to 9 p.m., we're going to be at the Covent Garden Market. So Naturopathy for All, which is a nonprofit organization that helps people access and pay for naturopathic care. We're going to be there at the Covent Garden Market Saturday, June 24th, and we're going to have vendors and food and entertainment. So really hope that you can join us. And if you'd like to donate, you can donate at naturopathyforall.com. And if you need to apply for funding, you can do so at the same address. So next month, we're going to be talking about diabetes and all of the factors around that. So I hope that you'll tune in, and we'll see you next time.